Sections 25 to 37 of On Providence and Fate by Proclus, translated by Thomas Taylor. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. 25. Because, however, we have made 3 discussions which we said were necessary to a distinct survey of the objects of inquiry, let us now pass to the doubts, and give to each of them an appropriate solution. In the first place, therefore, you consider this as a sufficient argument that what is in our power is frivolous, and is the work alone of the celestial bodies, videre licet, that we men assert ourselves to be the causes of those events which are attended with prosperity, but in things in which we are unfortunate, we transfer the cause to necessity, instead of ascribing them to choice. And thus doubting, you think you obtain this as a common conception concerning fate, that it has a more principal power in practical affairs than our impulses. Indeed, I myself do not see men otherwise affected than as ascribing to themselves the cause of their success, but to others the cause of their errors. But in this we differ, that you indeed admit the opinion of the many as sufficient to form a judgment of things, while I conceive them to reason in this way through a certain immoderate love of themselves. Among wise men, however, to whom it belongs to look both to whole and parts, and not to neglect the order which they possess with reference to them, divinity is considered as the principal cause of all events from which good is derived to all things. But the next causes to this are the period of the world and time, in which events are coadapted and coordinated to wholes, nothing being superfluously adventitious in the polity of wholes. And in the third place, they consider themselves as causes in those things in which they are allotted a deliberate choice, and in which by their impulses they cooperate to the completion of things. 26. When, however, anything happens contrary to their choice, then they deservedly ascribe the event to wholes alone, and the efficiency of wholes, as the conquering cause. For it is everywhere necessary that partial natures should energize in conjunction with wholes, but wholes without partial natures. And after this manner intellectual men divide events, but not as you have divided them. Here likewise Plato in the Laws, exclaiming that divinity indeed governs all things, but that after divinity, fortune and time rule over all human affairs, and that our art follows as the third after these. For during a tempest, the pilot's art contributes something, and in disease the medical art, and in short, in practical affairs the political art. If, therefore, our affairs are prosperous, fate, time, and divinity must be considered as the causes that they are so. Hence there will be 3 causes of events, divinity indeed causing that which comes to pass to be good, but time and fate causing it to be arranged in one concord with everything, and in short, another cause is human. For every human work is a part of the universe, but the contrary is not true, because it is necessary that other animals also, since they are parts of the universe, should not only act, but also suffer. For every part, indeed, of this mundane fabric and drama has for its end good, since no part of it is left inordinate, but is so woven with other parts as to contribute to the well-being of the universe. The contrary, however, is not true, that everything which is allotted good is coordinated with the mundane polity. For there is a supermundane life, and the life of the Gods, and of souls that transcend fate, and follow Providence alone. 27. Where then does that which is in our power exist? Since that which is generated is connected with the period of the world, and again, since it is produced from that alone. Where else should we say it exists than in our internal elections and impulses? For of these alone we are the lords. But things which take place external to us have many other more powerful beings as their lords. For it is necessary that what is generated externally should become a part of the universe, that it may also be generated, and that this should be effected through the consent and cooperation of the universe, that it may produce everything in itself, by one part of itself acting on another, and being passive from another. On this account, therefore, in the actions of men, we praise these persons, but we blame those, because through choice they were lords of their deeds, and we do not say that the universe, but the agent was the cause of the quality of the actions. For the quality of a deed is not derived from the universe, but from the life of the agent. It is, however, coordinated to the whole on account of the whole, and is again such as it is on account of a part. And that we assert these things with truth, the oracles of the Gods will manifest to you, since they often ascribe victory to our choice, and not to the order alone of the mundane periods; as for instance, when they say, "On beholding yourself, fear," and again, "Know thyself," and "Believe yourself to be above body, and you are." In short, they say, "That our sorrows germinate in us as the voluntary progeny of the particular life which we lead." 28. It is not fit, therefore, to refer all events to the order alone of the universe, as neither is it fit to refer them to our impulse alone. Nor again is it proper to separate the soul from those beings that have an absolute elective power, and whose very being consists in deliberate choice alone, and in declining this thing, but embracing that; though the soul in those events which take place is not the mistress of the universe. For it is requisite that every cause should aspire after that thing alone which it is naturally adapted to obtain. But that which is in our power is not only adapted to be active, but also to be essentially elective. It is also adapted to act electively in conjunction with other things, and either to err or act rightly on account of choice. For though the deed may be good, yet if the agent acts from a bad choice, we say that the action is bad. For that which is good in the deed is on account of something else, but that which is depraved is on account of the choice of him who performs the deed. Hence it is evident to all men that we are the lords of actions, so far as they are eligible. 29. But after this question you say that all of us are solicitous about futurity in all things, and even in those things which appear to be in our power. Speaking summarily, you say well. What then If we are all lovers of divination, is there nothing in our power? I, however, on the contrary say, that if nothing is in our power, but events are compelled to take place from motion alone, we shall not be lovers of divination. For what occasion is there for divination in things which owe their existence to external compulsion, and the knowledge of which is, as of things, future or not future? For such knowledge is superfluous when events are necessary, since it is impossible for that which is necessary not to come to pass, though we should 1,000 times consult about and be prescient of it. If, therefore, events necessarily happen, we are in vain solicitous about futurity. We are not, however, in vain solicitous about it, since this is natural to us, for nothing which is according to nature is in vain. Hence it is not proper to consider all things as produced by compulsion, in consequence of binding them by the circulation of the heavenly bodies. But we must admit that foreknowledge is in some things profitable to us, and that we do not live merely for the purpose of foreknowing events, but that by foreknowing we may contribute or not contribute something to things future, and may be more prompt in our energies. We must likewise admit that not divination only, but prayers and the whole business of sacred rites contribute something to our advantage. Or we must exile these, pouring oil on their heads, and crowning them with wool, and we must neither extend our hands upward, nor grant that we ought to worship those who are able to suspend the celestial influences. For men, when in difficult circumstances, will in vain indulge a hope of being liberated from them by invoking divinity, and Apollo himself will in vain give responses, unless by performing certain things it is possible to escape the punishment which is suspended from the celestial periods, and by not performing them, the dreaded event will necessarily take place. 30. Indeed, if this were not the case, would it not be perfectly absurd to make this division, and to allow conformably to the oracles of the Gods, that something must be granted to our choice? But neither must we proclaim this of divinity, videre licet, that his oracles are given in vain. Nor must we exterminate from human life the utility of divination, and of the sacerdotal office, because you have all history, both barbarian and Grecian, conjointly testifying that through divination, whether from divine inspiration or from human art, many have frequently known what it was requisite to do, and through this knowledge have been liberated from evils, which would have been otherwise inevitable. This then I determine as appropriate to the present discussion, that sometimes this much celebrated divination, and the performance of sacred rites, contribute to a certain thing being effected or not, and sometimes predominate over those generations which are introduced from the universe. When, therefore, since all things are in all, divine and demoniacal causes concur in one, and as it were assert the same thing, then the works of sacrifice are seen to be inefficacious. For it is impossible for a part to oppose and affect things contrary to the whole. And foreknowledge in this case neither adds nor takes away anything from the events which are the subjects of divination. But when, in consequence of there being many things of this kind, these effect one thing and those another, as for instance, these effect the destruction, but those the safety of the diseased, through the operations of the celestial bodies upon us, as is evident from all history, then the performance of some sacred rite, by employing cooperative powers, liberates us from the noxious defluxions by those that are beneficial. And the consideration of the future contributes much to effects. In short, that which is in our power being coordinated with these, or with other causes, as in calamities, in consequence of receiving a greater increase through its own motion, exhibits sometimes one and sometimes another end. And know that this takes place in things which are externally produced. Everywhere, however, the quality of the impulse has a prior existence, and choice characterizes that which is in our power. This also is the work of the soul, which abides in it and is not to be referred to the universe. Conformably, therefore, to these things, as it appears to me, you say that the universe governs all animals, and that we and other animals have a diminished life imparted from the air, and the first circulation, and that the rational part indeed is in the brain, but that what is called sense is in the organs of sense, and is conversant with different sensibles, but that the sight, the hearing, and the other senses differ only in their subjects, but are essentially one and without diversity. 31. Hearing you make this arrangement, I was surprised that a lover of philosophy and intellectual speculations, and why do I say of intellectual speculations, but who is also skilled in the paths of erudition, and in the inventions of geometry and arithmetic, should attribute as much to the senses as to our rational and intellectual essence, though they scarcely come into contact with the objects of knowledge through debile organs, and should conceive that they only differ from each other and from the rational part by a certain diversity of organs. For we have indeed elsewhere and prior to this shown that all the senses are inseparable from body, and incapable of being converted to themselves, but that the rational and intellectual life is naturally adapted to know itself, and in consequence of this knowledge to be converted to itself. For everything gnostic is according to energy converted to the object of knowledge, and therefore that which is gnostic of itself is converted to itself. What identity, therefore, do you see between the intellectual and the sensitive soul, between that which looks downward and that which tends upward? And in short, what identity do you perceive between the soul which is buried in bodies and the soul which is unmingled with bodies, between that which can never know truth and that which always extends itself to real being? 32. But if the appetite which is according to nature is not in vain in anything else, neither is it in that which is sometimes allotted the perception of truth. I omit to say that it is absurd to assert that the essence of a divine soul flows downward from ether, if it is proper to call that which is impossible absurd. For the souls which are derived from ether are allotted a corporeal generation, but the Athenian guest demonstrates that the rational soul is more ancient than all bodies. But if by ether you do not mean a body, but an ethereal intellect, or an intellectual soul surrounding ether, neither thus do you appear to me to have discovered the most true cause of the soul. For there is another fountain of souls from which ethereal souls, the souls of the sublunary elements, demoniacal souls, and ours are derived. And it is necessary to look to that cause, which Plato, concealing the truth as it appears to me, calls the crater, in which he represents the Demiurgus mingling the soul of the universe, as Timaeus says, not from ether, but prior to bodies. The Chaldean oracles also celebrate the essential fountain of every soul, viz. Of the imperial, ethereal, and material, and separate this from the whole vivific goddess, from which also, suspending the whole of Fate, they make two series, the one psychical, and the other fatal. Deriving the soul, therefore, from one of these series, they assert that it sometimes becomes subservient to Fate, when, becoming irrational, it changes its lord, viz. Fate for Providence. 33. That, as I have said, however, you have not asserted anything worthy the intellectual energy of geometry and arithmetic in coordinating our soul with the senses, you may learn by considering that the first employment of the sciences is to separate the soul from that energy which subsists in conjunction with the senses, to withdraw it from them as much as possible, to accustom it to look within, to see immaterial reasons, and to investigate demonstrations, the conclusions of which are contrary to the informations of the senses. For they indeed reject impartibility, but these sciences require it, and derive their existence from impartibles, since partibles are the principles of the former, but impartibles of the latter. And the knowledge of the senses indeed is confined to particulars, but universals, and those things the nature of which is always the same, are the objects of the knowledge of the above mentioned sciences, which they do not derive from the senses. For imperfect are not the causes of perfect things, but supernally from intellect, on which account also they sit in judgment on the senses, reprehend the grossness of their knowledge, the passivity of their perceptions, and their indefinite motions. 34. For indeed the knowledge of the senses is truly ludicrous, but the intention of the mathematical sciences is to liberate us from things ludicrous, and accustom us instead of pursuing these, to investigate the knowledge of real being. It belongs to the sensible life, therefore, to be under the dominion of Fate, and to be acted upon differently at different times, in conjunction with bodies, in which the necessity from Fate consists. For every form inseparable from matter is ingenerated in and contained by it, since it does not pertain to it, through being converted to itself to say that what externally accedes to it is one thing, and that which is true another. But it alone says that it announces passion, on which account it belongs to alter motive natures, in consequence of not having an energy perfectly liberated from them. The intellectual life, however, is according to its own nature converted to itself, and cannot endure to follow the violent passions of sense, but contains in itself criteria of the fallacious motions externally introduced, and adds indeed what is deficient to the passive perceptions of sense, and confutes the fallacy of its information, accomplishing at the same time all this by its own proper energy. For it is not the province of things which pertain to sense to form a judgment of sense, but this belongs to intellectual reasons, which the knowledge of sense is incapable of receiving. The immaterial, therefore, and separable life, and which energizes in itself, must be admitted to be contrary to that of sense, and to this must be given a choice of inclination, upward and downward, to intellect by which it was produced, and to sense which it generates. But we must admit that sense and all corporeal lives are without choice, because this is also the case with bodies. For the rational soul, being a medium between intellect and sense, tends to both on account of the unstable inclination of choice. But it becomes, according to habitude, each of the extremes, of which it is essentially neither. But the perfection which it derives from intellect, and the deception which it receives from sense, manifest its middle nature. And such as it appears to me is the correction of the dogma. 35. With respect to your opinion concerning good, which you have introduced into the midst of your inquiries, viz., that what is delectable to the several individuals of mankind is good, and that this exists by position, since different things are considered as legal by different nations, I should be ashamed indeed if in writing to a friend I did not manifestly assert that I conceive this opinion to be unworthy both of my choice and my years. For it does not appear to me to be at all wonderful that a young man, in consequence of looking to the opinions of men in many things, should form such an opinion. But I think he who admits that an aged intellect ought to preside as a judge, will adopt the decisions of intellectual conceptions, and not those which the rumour and unbalanced motions of the multitude have spread abroad. Now, therefore, because to the Persians some things appear to be delectable, and also certain things which are congruous to these delectables are considered by them as legal, but to the Greeks other things appear to be delectable and legal, and to other nations other things. On this account, a different thing is imagined to be good and delectable by different people, and whoever is allotted a delight which is naturally good to every one, will possess an end adapted to man. But whoever errs from this end, though he should be 1,000 times delighted with things which are present to him and appear to be good, yet he will reap but an imperfect fruit of such delight. 36. But it is, as it seems, true, that one inconvenience being given, others follow, which you also appear to me to suffer. For placing the soul under the dominion of Fate, you have coordinated her with the irrational senses, and collecting these into one and the same thing, you have mingled good with that which is debile. It is necessary, however, to eject both the former and this from the soul, that we may not ignorantly ascribe the same things to men as to brutes, whose life is without conversion to itself, and is naturally bent to earth, and whose knowledge is mingled with material passions. These things also are unfolded by Plato, with, as I may say, adamantine arguments. For, says he, that which is not good is not truly delectable, though all oxen should assert it to be so. For we are not to adduce the testimony of oxen, but of the Gods, with whom there is intellect, and the good of being, which is more divine than intellect itself. These things being clearly asserted in the Gorgias, the Philebus, and the Republic, I think it would be superfluous to dwell on them any farther. 37. This, however, I will add to what has been said, that the investigation of good is not to be mingled with the delectable. For thus the petulance of delight will cause us to be foolish. But the all various diversities of human customs and legal institutions are to be referred to the different lives of souls, viz. To the rational, the irascible, and the epithematic forms of life. For the former germinate from the latter, since, as it is said, they are not derived from an oak, nor from a rock. But the many-headed beast persuades these to establish such things by law as the Persians established. The leonine soul persuades others to adopt such things as the Thracians adopted, and in others reason prevails in the adoption of legal and true good. And the delectable indeed is common to all these. For the appetible, when present, is delectable to every one, but good is not delectable to all men, but to those in whom reason presides. For the passions do not see good, but this is alone the province of reason. And to reason indeed, the delectable and the good are the same. But the fabrication of things did not give to the blind passions the investigation of good, but of the delectable. For every species of life, when it energizes without impediment, is delighted. Hence, there are many legal institutions, and all various delectables, and they are different to different persons. But good is alone with those in whom reason predominates over the passions. For dominion must not be given to desire, that we may not be affected in the same manner as asses, nor to anger, that we may not resemble lions, but it must be given to that which is the most excellent part of our nature, which we alone are, or according to which we principally subsist. For the being of every thing which consists of many things, some better and others worse, is according to that which is the best among them. For that which is best sagaciously conjectures the nature of good. End of section 37. Sections 38 to 52 of On Providence and Fate by Proclus. Translated by Thomas Taylor. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. 38. As to what you afterwards write in the way of doubt, you seem to me to have written it in consequence of hearing Socrates in many places asserting that he knew nothing, deriding those who say that they know all things, and farther still contending that when we depart from hence we shall especially know the truth, and be in possession of more certain sciences, and also inferring that the mathematical are not truly sciences. You doubt therefore from all this whether it is not perhaps impossible to know the truth, and whether we do not only dream about it. Indeed, it is requisite you should at the same time understand that if it is not possible for us to know the truth, we do not more know if there is anything in our power than if there is not. For our ignorance of both similarly prevents our adoption of either of these positions. How, therefore, can we use the ignorance of truth in order to show whether there is anything which is in our power? Since, with respect to the existence and non-existence of this, ignorance possesses the same power, or rather impotency. 39. That we may not, however, suffer anything of this kind, we have already enumerated all the modes of knowledge, and have shown what the modes are of which the soul can participate here, and what those are when she assumes a supreme order. And of these, indeed, Socrates, possessing the former, but hoping that he shall obtain the latter on being liberated from the body, says, "that arriving thither he shall know the truth." For other measures and other objects of knowledge afforded him an opportunity of indulging such a hope. Because it is a thing usual with the friends of Plato to inquire whether it is possible for the soul to live not only cathartically, but also theoretically, while surrounded with this gross bond, the body. And I think the subject has been sufficiently discussed, and has been brought to this conclusion, that perhaps it is possible to live theoretically even here, like the Coropaean philosopher in the Theaetetus, astronomizing above the heavens, and investigating on all sides all the nature of beings; and also like those guardians in the Republic, who ascend as far as to the good itself, through that dialectic which Plato calls the defensive enclosure of the mathematical sciences. Again, however, that it is impossible while here to lead a theoretic life in perfection, is evident from the causes which are enumerated in the Phaedo, viz., the occupations and molestations of the body, which do not suffer us to energize theoretically without impediment and disturbance. For the life is theoretic, but the energy is called contemplation, and the contemplation of the One. 40. When also Socrates does not permit us to call the mathematical sciences truly sciences, he does not do this as denying that they have a necessity of demonstrations, but as falling short of the supreme of sciences. And why should I not say, at falling short of dialectic, which no longer considers a point, or the monad as a principle, but the good, and considers the principle of all things? Whence also, as I conceive, Socrates, in the section of a line, in the 6th book of the Republic, assigns the second part to the mathematical sciences, but to perfectly immaterial and separate forms he assigns a part, and a knowledge prior to these, the former proceeding from hypothesis, but the latter being unhypothetical. And with Socrates, the author of the Epinomis likewise accords, for he calls dialectic the bond of the mathematical sciences, as uniting the principles of all of them. 41. But if Socrates asserted that he knew nothing, and the Pythian oracle pronounced him to be on this account the wisest of all men, as he himself informs us, consider the profound meaning both of the Pythian deity and of Socrates, and how by the assertion of knowing nothing this is implied, that the good alone possesses an exempt transcendency, but not he who possesses scientific knowledge, and this it is to know that he does not know. For the attainment of such a knowledge as this appears to be the principal business of those who intend to be wise. For in reality he is truly wise who knows that he is not truly wise, and is not ignorant of this. For to whom does it belong to know that he does not scientifically know everything, but to him who possesses knowledge? For it is indeed necessary that he should perfectly know that he does not know everything, since he will know himself not to possess a scientific knowledge of all things. Hence, no one will perfectly know that he does not possess scientific knowledge in perfection, till he knows that he possesses scientific knowledge. For then he will at one and the same time know that he knows, and what the things are which he does not know, and will both know that he knows and that he does not know, possessing a middle knowledge, and science alone, which subsists between those natures that know truth wholly, and those that do not know it at all, of which the former is intellect, but the latter sense. For sense neither knows real being, nor the essence itself of sensibles, of which it is feigned to be the knowledge, but intellect knows essence itself, and the real truth itself of being. 42. The soul, therefore, being a medium between these, knows the essences of things as being prior to sense, and does not know them as being posterior to intellect. He, therefore, that is wise, will both know that he knows, and that he does not know. And thus much, my friend, in answer to the assertion of Socrates, and concerning that which is real wisdom. Hence it is not proper to exterminate the reasons pertaining to science, neither on account of the mathematical sciences being distinguished from the first science, nor on account of the hope of obtaining true knowledge after a separation from hence, nor on account of the answer of the Pythian deity. For it is Plato himself who exclaims that if science is destroyed, it will no longer be possible to make an assertion about anything, and not even about that which is contingent. But he shows indeed what the knowledge is which the soul may assume while it is united to the body, and what it may obtain when it is freed from its bonds, and also what that is which is at the same time knowledge and not science. He likewise shows that there is one knowledge which is true science, an intellect better than science, and an intelligence which deifies intellect, and that the soul perceiving this knowledge, and not being able to obtain it in this life, desires a departure from body, that she may then be allotted this supernatural and divine comprehension of beings. But of these things enough. 43. In consequence, however, of what you have said, you doubt why good men are in a worse condition, in consequence of failing to obtain the end which was the object of their wishes, but bad men are allotted the things which they desire. You therefore indeed think that this also is an argument in favor of the non-existence of anything which is in our power. And indeed, if this is an argument of the non-existence of anything in our power, that things do not happen to the good according to their wishes, the success of bad men in gaining the objects of their desire will be an argument in proof of the existence of something which is in our power. It is better, however, not to adduce opposing arguments to what you say, but merely to show you that this doubt was proposed by some of the ancients, not only with a view to the subversion of that which is in our power, but also with a view to the investigation whether Providence has any existence. And this inquiry of the ancients has been extended to Plotinus himself, to Iamblichus, and your namesake, Theodorus Asinius. For the unexpected introduction of fortunate events shakes in reality our invincible preconceptions of Providence, and the affair requires intellectual inspection, if the objector, being saved from that doubt, ought to commit everything to Providence. 44. If, therefore, we are not the lords of anything, and have not an elective life from ourselves, and neither good nor evil is from us, but these are externally produced, there is no longer any occasion to doubt of events as if they happened contrary to desert, since both good and evil derive their subsistence from an external source. For if we do not cause ourselves to be such characters as we are, it will not be requisite that there should be any retribution for our life, nor, in short, is anything due from those who are not the causes of the life which they lead. Hence, if the retribution of fortunate events is contrary to desert, we ourselves shall be the cause of the lives, the desert of which it is said we are allotted in the distributions from the universe, because of all the things that surround us, we do not require to have retribution in what we derive from wholes, but in those things in which we cooperate something. If, therefore, there is nothing in our power, we shall have nothing from ourselves, and if this be the case, neither should we desire retributions of those things which we derive from an external source, and this being admitted, neither should we accuse the distribution of events as contrary to desert. 45. If, therefore, there is nothing in our power, it is not fit to inquire why good men fail in obtaining the end they desire, contrary to desert, but bad men obtain this end. But admitting there is something which is in our power, and that Providence has dominion over all things, we say, adducing to you persuasion after violence, that what is in our power does not predominate over, but cooperates with things external. The rational soul, therefore, very properly disposes things that are internal according to its own power, but it cannot do this with externals, because these require other things in order to their distribution, which are not inherent in it. I am delighted, however, with these doubts of yours, perceiving in you a generous proselyte, whom I frequently desire not to confound those things which are in our power with those which are not, nor to be so disposed with respect to things which are not in our power, as if they ought entirely to take place, in order that we may bear them without difficulty when they do take place. Now, however, the doubt happens from things which are out of, not conforming themselves to things which are in our power, though we fancy that they ought, and also from supposing that to be good for us which is not, and seeking for its accomplishment. But it would be better for us always to explore the true and real beings that are in us, and acquire them for ourselves, and to leave things external, and which are not in our power, to the causes of them, as to masters who know what they do. We should likewise be prepared for those things which are not, by those things which are in our power. In what manner, therefore, the doubt pertains to that which is in our power, we have shown you through such arguments as these. But you ought rather to refer it, as we have said, to the doubt concerning Providence. And many things, as I have before observed, have been said on this subject by the ancients, and they thus solve the doubt. 46. Again, therefore, you inquire what that which is in our power is, which it was requisite to investigate in the beginning of the discussion, and afterwards you doubt concerning it. But inquiring about it, you define it to be that which is of itself uncircumscribed and self-energetic. If, however, this be the case, it is entirely incorruptible, and most powerful, and alone pertains to the ruler of all beings, but is not adapted to that which is in our power. I, therefore, consider this definition to be very remote from that conception of what is in our power, which the ancients adopting attributed this to human souls. But do you also consider the truth of what I say? For they assumed that which is in our power as indicative of the energy of choice, making us to be the lords of choice and aversion, and as indicative of the choice of some good or the contrary. For they did not consider choice and will to be the same, but they asserted that the latter pertains to good alone, but the former both to good and evil, just as false opinion pertains to that which is not good. Hence also they said that election or choice characterizes the soul, which extends itself both to what is good and what is not good, and that this pertains to the middle nature of that being which is converted to both these. This also common rumor testifies. For we praise the choice of these, but blame the choice of those. Evil, however, is not wished for by any one, and evil indeed appears to be good to those that choose it. For no soul, knowing a thing to be evil, would choose, but would avoid it. On account of ignorance, however, the soul is busily employed about it. For she naturally possesses an acute love of good, but sometimes is powerless with respect to the attainment of it. 47. The soul, therefore, essentially possessing an inclination to both, videre to good and evil, the ancients called this power of her elective, on account of which we are naturally adapted to choose one thing instead of another. And indeed, you may obtain from division such a definition of this power, because all power is either rational or irrational. It is necessary that choice should be in one of these. But since it is not irrational, for we all say that the irrational power is without choice, it will be a certain rational power. But every rational, as well as every irrational power, is either gnostic or appetitive. Choice, however, being election and desire, will be a certain appetite. But every appetite either alone looks to that which is real good, or to that which is only apparent good, or to both these. We say, however, that choice does not look to real good alone, for if it did, it would never be justly blamed, nor to apparent good alone, for in this case it would not frequently be praised. Hence, such a power is naturally adapted to look to both these. 48. Election, therefore, is in short a rational power, desirous both of true and apparent good, leading the soul to both, on account of which she ascends and descends, errs and acts with rectitude. The ancients, perceiving the energy of this power, called the inclination of it both to real and apparent good a twofold path in our nature. Hence the elective and that which is in our power will be the same thing. And according to this power, we differ from divine and from mortal natures. For each of these is unreceptive of this twofold inclination, since the former indeed, on account of their transcendent excellence, are alone established in true good, but the latter, on account of defect, in apparent good. For intellect indeed characterizes the former, but sense the latter. And the former is our king, but the latter our messenger. We, however, being of a middle nature, are established in choice, and are capable of being moved both to true and apparent good. But wherever we move, we are on all sides comprehended by wholes, from which we are allotted what is according to desert. And if indeed we tend to that which is better, we thus tend as intellect, but if to that which is subordinate, as sense. That which is in our power, therefore, is not capable of affecting all things. For that which can affect all things is a power characterized by unity, and on this account can affect all things because it is one and boniform. But the power which is elective is dyadic, and on this account cannot accomplish all things, because by its twofold inclinations it falls short of that nature which is prior to all things. It would, however, be itself effective of all things, if it had not an elective impulse, for then it would be will alone. For a life characterized by will subsists according to good, which causes that which is in our power to be most powerful, and is truly deiform, on account of which the soul also becomes a god, and, as Plato says, governs the whole world. 49. Hence, that which is in our power neither pertains to the first, nor to the last of things, but to the medium between both. You, however, as it seems, have conceived it to be a power ruling over all things, leading all things according to its own impulse, and obtaining everything which it desires. For you do not define it to be a power over the objects of desire within the soul, and which cause the electing soul to be such as it is, but you ascribe to it a power over things which are not in its power. For things external to the soul are not in our power, on which account also our life is mingled from things which are not, and from things which are in our power. And with worthy men, indeed, there is much of that which is in our power, for they use all things, modifying even those that are out of our power on account of virtue, and always adorning the present circumstance. But with the multitude there is more of that which is not in our power, for they follow things external to themselves, not possessing a life within which is able to assimilate them to themselves. Hence worthy men indeed are said to be free, and are so on account of the energy, both of that which is in, and of that which is not in their power. But the multitude are called into servile necessity, in consequence of burying those things which are in their power, with those that are not, and possessing all things not in themselves. 50. After all this, you have added the colophon or summit of the doubts, by asking whether divinity knows or does not know events which are future to us. And if indeed he does not know them, you will say that he does not at all differ from us, who have no knowledge of futurity. But if he does know them, that which he knows will entirely and from necessity come to pass. This, however, as it would seem, not only destroys that which is in our power, but likewise everything which is said to be contingent. This also is usually said by those who conceive all things to exist by compulsion, and, as I may say, has been asserted 1,000 times. But they all reason as follows. If divinity knows every future event, that which is future will be from necessity. And they indeed assert it to be false that divinity knows everything definitely. But they say that his knowledge is indefinite of things which indefinitely come to pass, in order that they may save what is contingent. Others, however, attributing a definite knowledge to divinity, admit necessity in everything which comes to pass. these are the dogmas of the Peripatetic and Stoic sects. But Plato, and whoever is a friend to Plato, affirm that divinity definitely knows future events, and that nevertheless some things are produced definitely, and others indefinitely, according to their respective natures. For those things which in effects subsist with division, and contrarily, are antecedently comprehended in the Gods according to a more excellent condition only. 51. I say, for instance, the causes of generated natures, whether they are incorporeal or corporeal, subsist incorporeally with the Gods, and in a similar manner their knowledge is incorporeal. And again, the causes of intellectual and of non-intellectual beings subsist with the Gods both essentially and according to science. For they also know things which are not intellectual intellectually. And again, of things which are produced by them, that are either temporal or without time, there is with them a cause and a knowledge exempt from time. Hence, because of effects, some are definite, but others indefinite. The Gods antecedently assume the knowledge of both these according to the more excellent mode, videre licet, according to the definite. Moreover, the form of knowledge is not such as the object of knowledge, but such as the Gnostic nature. For knowledge is not in that which is known, but in that which knows. Hence it is similar, and of the like form, to that in which it is, and not to that in which it is not. If, therefore, that which is known is indefinite, but that which knows it is definite, the knowledge is not also indefinite on account of the thing known, but definite on account of that which knows. For it is possible to know that which is subordinate after a more excellent mode, and that which is supreme after an inferior mode. 52. Hence, because the Gods are better than all things, they antecedently comprehend all things after a more excellent mode. And beings, indeed, they comprehend superessentially. Things which are according to time, as we have already said, prior to time. Corporeal natures, incorporeally. Material natures, immaterially. Definitely, things indefinite. Permanently, things unstable. And ingenerably, things generable. It does not therefore follow that if they know what will be, the event must happen from necessity. But to the event indeed we must give an indefinite generation from a definite cause, and to the Gods a definite foreknowledge of that which is indefinite. For neither does it follow that because your art employs drums and wheels, and corporeal materials, these subsisted corporeally in your foreknowledge, but your imagination comprehended in itself incorporeally and vitally the productive principle of the future machine, and the astrolabe was corporeally fashioned from an internal knowledge which is not corporeal. If this, however, is the case in your art, what ought you to say of the foreknowledge of the Gods, in which all things subsist in a manner truly ineffable, and not to be circumscribed by us? Is it not evident that this mode of comprehension is different from, and in no respect allied to the things which are produced by it? Hence the Gods know divinely, and in a way unaccompanied by time, those things which are in our power, and we energize as we are naturally adapted. Whatever we choose also is foreknown by them, not on account of the boundary which is in us, but on account of the boundary which is with them. Such, my friend, is my answer to your inquiries, independent of which I am able to show you that there is something in our power, from praise and blame, from counsel, from exhortation and dehortation, from judicial affairs, from accusation and defense, from all political erudition, from legislation, from prayer, from sacerdotal methods, and from philosophy itself. For you well know that my preceptor Syrianus used frequently to say, that if that which is in our power were destroyed, philosophy would be superfluous. For what should it instruct when there is nothing which can be instructed, when there is nothing in us by which we may become better? Reconsidering therefore these things again and again, if you still have any doubts, do not be averse to write to me. For what subjects can we more aptly discuss than those, in the disquisition of which no one will accuse us of nugacity? End of On Providence and Fate. Extracts from 10 Doubts Concerning Providence and Commentary on the Parmenides of Plato by Proclus, translated by Thomas Taylor. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. 1. Whether providence extends to all things, to wholes and parts, and as far as to the most indivisible natures in the heavens and in the sublunary regions, in things eternal and things corruptible. This Proclus affirms, and says that every particular, even of the minutest things, depends on the beneficent providence of divinity. For nothing escapes that one, whether you speak of the essence of a thing, or its being known. It is said indeed, and is rightly said, that the whole circle is centrally in the centre, since the centre is the cause, but the circle the thing caused. And for the same reason, every number is monadically in unity. But in the one of providence, all things subsist after a more exalted mode, since that is more transcendently one than a centre and the monad. 2. How divinity foreknows and provides for things contingent. Proclus answers that divinity, on account of his most perfect nature, knows in their seeds and causes things indefinite definitely, as he also knows things distant and corporeal without distance and incorporeally. 3. Whether providence is the cause of things definite and indefinite, according to the same and after the same manner. Proclus answers that to provide for is nothing else than to benefit, and that hence everything participates of that one good according to its own measure and order, so that providence retains its unity and liberty even in things indefinite. In the same chapter also, he proves that divinity provides for things contingent and indefinite, that they may not be, as it were, superadventitious in the universe. For, says he, if the gods are willing and able to provide definitely for things indefinite, as being the authors of them, they will entirely provide for them, and providing will know the desert of the subjects of their providential energy. And the Gods, indeed, with an exempt transcendency, extend their providence to all things; but demons, dividing their superessential subsistence, receive the guardianship of different herds of animals, distributing the providence of the Gods, as Plato says, as far as to the most ultimate division. Hence some of them preside over men, others over lions or other animals, and others over plants, and still more partially, some are the inspective guardians of the eye, others of the heart, and others of the liver. All things, however, are full of Gods, some of whom exert their providential energies immediately, but others through demons as media; not that the Gods are incapable of being present to all things, but that ultimate are of themselves incapable of participating first natures. 4. How the participations of the Gods are effected, or how the Gods energize providentially on inferior natures. Proclus answers that the participations are according to the aptitude of the participants. Videre licet, they subsist rationally in rational, but intellectually in intellectual natures, and imaginably and sensibly in those beings that live according to imagination and sense; and they subsist essentially and through being alone in those things which are without life. Hence Providence, being established above all beings, according to divine union itself, and energizing according to one energy adapted to the One, everything which accedes to it participates of it according to its natural adaptation. With respect to the failure of the oracles, he says, that the energy of divinity remaining always the same, places or men become unadapted to its participation, just as if a certain statue, always remaining the same, a mirror should at one time exhibit a fulgid image of it, but at another an obscure or debile, or indeed no image of it at all. He adds, if, therefore, it should be said that oracles sometimes participate of the Gods, who are the sources of divination, but at other times fail, becoming inefficacious, and as it were without spirit, for a certain period, the causes of this irregularity must be referred to the vapors that are the instruments of inspiration failing, through an inability of always being the participants of divine influence. For the oracles are true, which give completion to the phenomena, and angels, demons, and heroes are veracious, which the Gods and the perpetually existing allotments in the universe illuminate, though certain waters and openings of the earth cannot always participate of them, on account of their unstable nature. Or if it should be said that the powers of sacred rites, sometimes entering into statues, causing them to be vitalized, and filling them with divine inspiration, fail in certain periods of time, the failure of these also I should think it proper to refer to the recipients, and not to any variation of the energy of the Gods that inspire them. For neither do we dare to accuse the sun as the cause of the eclipse of the moon, but the conical shadow of the earth into which the moon falls. 5. Whence and why evil subsists, since there is Providence? Proclus answers that there are two kinds of evils, one in bodies, contrary to nature, the other in souls, contrary to reason. The kingdom of Providence, however, says he, is molested by neither of them. But to the former of these evils, the end is good, and the variety and perfection of the universe. For everything which is preternatural takes place in order that something which is according to nature may be effected, but not vice versa. And with respect to the latter of these evils, between beings more perfect than we are and brutes, it is necessary that souls should intervene as a medium, which are endued with reason, anger, and desire, and rejoice in freedom of will. 6. If Providence is, why are good men oppressed with evil, but bad men triumph? Proclus answers that notwithstanding this, virtue and the matter of virtue are not wanting to the good, and also that this praise is peculiar to them, that they had rather cultivate naked virtue than vice with all her abundance. That it is not an evil to be deprived of the incentives to evil, that some have even earnestly desired adverse fortune, and that wise men have always borne it with fortitude. Nor is it expedient that wise men should at one and the same time abound with every kind of good. For it is necessary that they should have a certain experience of the evils of the present life, by which the soul, being excited, desires a transition from hence to that place which is beyond the reach of evil. He adds that many, through adversity, have arrived at greater attainments in virtue, and that in short, those things only are evil which we ourselves perpetrate, and not those which we suffer from an external cause. That all bad men are without glory and without honor, though they should be surrounded by thousands of flatterers. To the question which he adjoins to this, why Providence distributes equal to unequal things, according to arithmetical and not according to geometrical equality, as when a whole city perishes, there is a similar destruction of dissimilar men, viderelicet, of the good and the bad, he answers as follows. In the first place, indeed, they do not suffer this similitude of punishment so far as they are dissimilar, but so far as they are similar, in consequence of voluntarily inhabiting the same city, or entering the same ship, and fighting together, or mutually suffering anything else of the same species. And so, according to the energy of that species, they suffer a certain something which is the same. So far, however, as they are better and worse, they participate differently of the common calamity, since the latter perish, bearing it impatiently, but the former enduring it mildly. And after a separation from the present life, the place destined to be the habitation of more excellent beings receives the former, but the abode of subordinate beings receives the latter. Proclus afterwards adds that there is a certain order and a period of common fate, terminating from different principles in the same end, and a concurrence of progressions, where the less principal parts are compelled from necessity to be co-passive, and that we are ignorant of the true equalities of souls. 7. If Providence extends as far as to the lowest beings, whence is the great inequality in the allotments of brutes, their mutual devorations, and the like derived? Proclus answers that if there is anything in them of a self-motive nature, the cause of this must be investigated from a higher source. But if they are only corporeal, it is of no consequence if they suffer the same thing as a shadow, all variously transformed, and are subject to fate. why punishments do not immediately follow after crimes, but are inflicted at length after the commission of them, and this sometimes is very long after. Proclus answers that the implanted root of wickedness, just as the earth bearing thorns, though the germs are 1,000 times cut off, still produces the like, renders the same energies, in consequence of continuing inflexible by punishment. Providence, therefore, waits for an appropriate time, not such as may be pleasing to the vulgar, but such as it knows will contribute to the health of souls, and instructs many by endurance. For together with the gods, says Plato, fortune and time govern all things, whether it be requisite that some good should be imparted, or that there should be a purification from something contrary to good. In the next place, vice is a punishment to itself, and the most grievous injury the soul can sustain. Precipitate anger also is not a good dispensator of punishments. Plato, once being about to chastise a slave, was seen holding his hand in an elevated position for some time, and being asked why he did so, said that he was punishing his own impetuous anger. Archytas said to his servants in a field, who had not done what he had ordered them to do, and expected to be punished for their negligence, "It is well for you that I am angry." And Theano said to one of her servants, "If I were not angry, I would chastise you." Among the Egyptians there was a law, that a pregnant woman who was judged worthy of death should not be put to death till she was delivered. What wonder, therefore, is it that Providence should for a time spare those who are deserving of death, but are able to perform not trifling, but illustrious actions, till they have accomplished them? If Themistocles had been immediately punished for what he did when he was a young man, who would have delivered Athens from the Persian evils? Who also would have explained the Pythian oracle? If Dionysius had perished in the beginning of his tyranny, who would have freed Sicily, which was thought to be irremediably lost, from the Chalcedonians? If the punishment of Periander had not been deferred for a long time, who would have freed the pleasant island of Leucadia? Who would have liberated Anaxorium from its adversaries? To which may be added, that the time of deferred punishment seems long to our feeble vision, but is nothing to the eye of Providence, just as the place also in which we live and carry about these bodies is perfectly small for the punishment of great offences. But there are many and indescribable places of punishment in the infernal regions, and excessive torments for the offenders that are there. On account of the magnitude of the punishment likewise, the whole of it is not inflicted at once. Souls also are naturally adapted to feel remorse, which is the forerunner of their greatest sufferings. For they say that Apollodorus the tyrant saw himself in a dream scourged and boiled by certain persons, and his heart exclaiming from the kettle, "I am the cause of these thy torments." But Ptolemy, who was surnamed Thunder, thought in a dream that he was called to judgment by Seleucus, and that vultures and wolves sat there as his judges. Such are the preludes to the vicious of impending punishment. 9. How the crimes of other persons, as for instance of parents or potentates, are punished in children and subjects. For that certain persons are said to have suffered punishment for the crimes of their ancestors, both revelations and the mysteries manifest, and certain liberating gods are said to purify from them. Proclus answers that a nation, or a family, or a city must be considered as one body, and that these have kindred powers that preside over them, so that such crimes are not foreign, on account of this conjunction and similitude. Why, therefore, should it be any longer paradoxical that souls, when transferred into other bodies, should suffer punishment for the crimes which they have committed in former bodies? 10. Since the providence of divinity knows all things, and reduces them to good, how are angels and demons, and, if you are also willing, heroes and souls that govern the world in conjunction with the gods, said to exert a providential energy? Proclus answers that divinity provides for all things universally and totally, but the other powers partially, subordinately, and for certain things only. In order to supply as much as possible the loss of the entire treatise of Proclus on this subject, the following admirable observations on Providence are added, translated from his commentary on the Parmenides of Plato, a work which, to the disgrace of Europe, is still only extant in manuscript. Quote, "The Athenian guest in the Laws clearly evinces that there is a providence, where his discourse shows that the gods know and possess a power which governs all things. But Parmenides, at the very beginning of the discussion concerning providence, evinces the absurdity of doubting divine knowledge and dominion. For to assert that the conclusion of this doubt is still more dire than the former, i.e., that divinity is not known by us, sufficiently shows that he rejects the arguments which subvert providence. For it is dire to say that divinity is not known by us who are rational and intellectual natures, and who essentially possess something divine. But it is still more dire to deprive divine natures of knowledge, since the former pertains to those who do not convert themselves to divinity, but the latter to those who impede the all-pervading goodness of the gods, and the former pertains to those who err respecting our essence, but the latter to those who convert themselves erroneously about a divine cause. But the expression still more dire, denoteron, is not used as signifying a more strenuous doubt, in the same manner as we are accustomed to call those dire, deinoi, who vanquish by the power of language, but as a thing worthy of greater dread and caution to the intelligent. For it divulses the union of things, and dissociates divinity apart from the world. It also defines divine power as not pervading to all things, and circumscribes intellectual knowledge as not all perfect. It likewise subverts all the fabrication of the universe, the order imparted to the world from separate causes, and the goodness which fills all things from one will, in a manner adapted to the nature of unity. Nor less dire than any one of these is the confusion of piety. For what communion is there between gods and men, if the former are deprived of the knowledge of our concerns? All supplications, therefore, of divinity, all sacred institutions, all oaths adducing the gods as a witness, and the untaught conceptions implanted in our souls concerning divinity will perish. what gift also will be left of the Gods to men, if they do not previously comprehend in themselves the desert of the recipients, if they do not possess a knowledge of all that we do, of all we suffer, and of all that we think, though we do not carry it into effect? With great propriety, therefore, are such assertions called dire. For if it is unholy to change any legitimately divine institutions, how can such an innovation as this be unattended with dread? But that Plato rejects this hypothesis, which makes divinity to be ignorant of our concerns, is evident from these things, since it is one of his dogmas that divinity knows and produces all things. Since, however, some of those posterior to him have vehemently endeavored to subvert such like assertions, let us speak concerning them as much as may be sufficient for our present purpose. Some of those then posterior to Plato, on seeing the unstable condition of sublunary things, were fearful that they were not under the direction of Providence and a divine nature. For such events as are said to take place through fortune, the apparent inequality respecting lives, and the disordered motion of material natures, induced them greatly to suspect that they were not under the government of Providence. Besides, the persuasion that divinity is not busily employed in the evolution of all various reasons, and that he does not depart from his own blessedness, induced them to frame an hypothesis so lawless and dire. For they were of opinion that the passion of our soul, and the perturbation which it sustains by descending to the government of bodies, must happen to divinity, if he converted himself to the providential inspection of things. Farther still, from considering that different objects of knowledge are known by different Gnostic powers, as for instance, sensibles by sense, objects of opinion by opinion, things scientific by science, and intelligibles by intellect, and at the same time neither placing sense, nor opinion, nor science in divinity, but only an intellect immaterial and pure. Hence they asserted that divinity had no knowledge of any other things than the objects of intellect, and this was the opinion of the more early Peripatetics. For, say they, if matter is external to him, it is necessary that he should be pure from apprehensions which are converted to matter. But being purified from these, it follows that he must have no knowledge of material natures. Hence the patrons of this doctrine deprived him of a knowledge of, and providential exertions about sensibles, not through any imbecility of nature, but through a transcendency of Gnostic energy, just as those whose eyes are filled with light are said to be incapable of perceiving mundane objects, at the same time that this incapacity is nothing more than transcendency of vision. They likewise add that there are many things which it is beautiful not to know. Thus, to the entheastic, or those who are divinely inspired, it is beautiful to be ignorant of whatever would destroy the deific energy, and to the scientific, not to know that which would defile the indubitable perception of science. But others, as the Stoics, ascribe indeed to divinity a knowledge of sensibles, in order that they may not take away his providence, but at the same time convert his apprehension to that which is external, represent him as pervading through the whole of a sensible nature, as passing into contact with the objects of his government, impelling everything, and being locally present with all things. For, say they, he would not otherwise be able to extend a providential energy in a becoming manner, and impart good to everything according to its desert. Others again affirm that divinity has a knowledge of himself, but that he has no occasion to understand sensibles in order to provide for them, since by his very essence he produced all things, and adorns whatever he has produced, without having any knowledge of his productions. They add that this is by no means wonderful, since nature operates without knowledge, and unattended with fantasy; but that divinity differs from nature in this, that he has a knowledge of himself, though not of the things which are fabricated by him. And such are the assertions of those who were persuaded that divinity is not separated from mundane natures, and of those who deprived him of the knowledge of inferior concerns, and of a knowledge operating in union with Providence. With respect to these philosophers, we say that they speak truly, and yet not truly, on this subject. For if Providence has a subsistence, neither can there be anything disordered, nor can divinity be busily employed, nor can he know sensibles through passive sense. But these philosophers, in consequence of not knowing the exempt power and uniform knowledge of divinity, appear to deviate from the truth. For thus we interrogate them: does not everything energize in a becoming manner, when it energizes according to its own power and nature? As for instance, does not nature, in conformity to the order of its essence, energize physically, intellect intellectually, and soul psychically, or according to the nature of soul? And when the same thing is generated by many and different causes, does not each of these produce according to its own power, and not according to the nature of the thing produced? Or shall we say that each produces after the same manner, and that, for example, the sun and man generate man according to the same mode of operation, and not according to the natural ability of each? Viz., the one partially, imperfectly, and with a busy energy, but the other without anxious attention, by its very essence and totally. But to assert this would be absurd, for a divine operates in a manner very different from a mortal nature. If, therefore, everything which energizes, energizes according to its own nature and order, some things divinely and supernaturally, others naturally, and others in a different manner, it is evident that every Gnostic being knows according to its own nature, and that it does not follow that because the thing known is one and the same, on this account the natures which know energize in conformity to the essence of the things known. Thus sense, opinion, and our intellect know that which is white, but not in the same manner, for sense cannot know what the essence is of a thing white, nor can opinion obtain a knowledge of its proper objects in the same manner as intellect, since opinion knows only that a thing is, but intellect knows the cause of its existence. Knowledge, therefore, subsists according to the nature of that which knows, and not according to the nature of that which is known. What wonder is it then that divinity should know all things in such a manner as is accommodated to his nature, viz., divisible things indivisibly, things multiplied uniformly, things generated according to an eternal intelligence, totally, such things as are partial, and that, with a knowledge of this kind, he should possess a power productive of all things, or in other words, that by knowing all things with simple and united intellections, he should impart to everything being and a progression into being. For the auditory sense knows audibles in a manner different from the common sense, and prior to and different from these, reason knows audibles, together with other particulars, which sense is not able to apprehend; and again of desire, which tends to one thing; of anger, which aspires after another thing; and of proeresis, or deliberate choice, there is one particular life moving the soul towards all these, which are mutually motive of each other. It is through this life that we say, I desire, I am angry, and I deliberately choose this thing or that. For this life verges to all these powers, and lives in conjunction with them, as being a power which is impelled to every object of desire. But prior both to reason and this one life is the one of the soul, which often says, I perceive, I reason, I desire, and I deliberate, which follows all these energies, and energizes together with them. For we should not be able to know all these, and to apprehend in what they differ from each other, unless we contained a certain indivisible nature, which has a subsistence above the common sense, and which prior to opinion, desire, and will, knows all that these know, and desire, according to an indivisible mode of apprehension. If this be the case, it is by no means proper to disbelieve in the indivisible knowledge of divinity, which knows sensibles without possessing sense, and divisible natures without possessing a divisible energy, and which without being present to things in place knows them prior to all local presence, and imparts to everything that which everything is capable of receiving. The unstable essence, therefore, of apparent natures is not known by him in an unstable, but in a definite manner; nor does he know that which is subject to all various mutations dubiously, but in a manner perpetually the same. For by knowing himself he knows everything of which he is the cause, possessing a knowledge transcendently more accurate than that which is coordinate to the objects of knowledge, since a causal knowledge of every thing is superior to every other kind of knowledge. Divinity therefore knows without busily attending to the objects of his intellection, because he abides in himself, and by alone knowing himself knows all things; nor is he indigent of sense, or opinion, or science, in order to know sensible natures; for it is himself that produces all these, and that in the unfathomable depths of the intellection of himself comprehends an united knowledge of them, according to cause, and in one simplicity of perception; just as if some one having built a ship should place in it men of his own formation, and in consequence of possessing a various art, should add a sea to the ship, produce certain winds, and afterwards launch the ship into the new created main. Let us suppose too, that he causes these to have an existence by merely conceiving them to exist, so that by imagining all this to take place, he gives an external subsistence to his inward phantasms. It is evident that in this case he will contain the cause of everything which happens to the ship through the winds on the sea, and that by contemplating his own conceptions, without being indigent of outward conversion, he will at the same time both fabricate and know these external particulars. Thus, and in a far greater degree, that divine intellect, the artificer of the universe, possessing the causes of things, both gives subsistence to, and contemplates, whatever the universe contains, without departing from the speculation of himself. But if, with respect to intellect, one kind is more partial, and another more total, it is evident that there is not the same intellectual perfection of all things, but that where intelligibles have a total and undistributed subsistence, there the knowledge is more total and indivisible; and where the number of forms proceeds into multitude and extension, there the knowledge is both one and multiform. Hence, this being admitted, we cannot wonder on hearing the Orphic verses in which the theologist says, "Aute de xenos kai en omasi patros anaktos naius athanatoi te theoi, synetoi te anthropoi, ossa te en gegosa, kai usteron osso emelon." Id est. There, in the sight of Jove, the parent king, the immortal gods and mortal men reside, with all that ever was, and shall hereafter be. For the artificer of the universe is full of intelligibles, and possesses the causes of all things separated from each other, so that he generates men, and all other things according to their characteristic peculiarities, and not so far as each is divine, in the same manner as the divinity prior to him, the intelligible Father, Phanes. The admirable dogma in this most beautiful extract, "that knowledge subsists according to the nature of that which knows, and not according to the nature of that which is known," was originally derived from Iamblichus, as is evident from the commentary of Ammonius on Aristotle's treatise on Interpretation. See note to page 162 of my translation of the Organon. Boethius, in the 5th book of his treatise De Consolatione, elegantly illustrates this dogma. The passage I allude to begins with the words, "Omne enim quod cognoscitur, non secundum sui vim, sed secundum cognoscentium potius comprehenditur facultatem." The sources, however, from whence he derived this doctrine appear to have been unknown to all his editors and commentators, for they are not noticed by any of them. End of extracts from 10 Doubts Concerning Providence and Commentary on the Parmenides of Plato. Extracts from the Treatise of Proclus on the Subsistence of Evil by Thomas Taylor. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. In this treatise, Proclus inquires first whether there is such a thing as evil; secondly, if there is, whether it is in intellectual natures; thirdly, if evil is in sensibles, whether it subsists according to a principal cause; fourthly, if it does not subsist according to a principal cause, whether any essence must be assigned to it, or whether it must be admitted to be perfectly unessential and without hypostasis; fifthly, And if this be the case, how does it subsist, another principle existing? And whence does it originate? And how far does it proceed? And farther still, sixthly, how, since Providence exists, does evil subsist? And whence is it derived? If the Father of the universe not only produced the nature of good, but was also willing that there should be nothing evil anywhere, by what contrivance or art does evil subsist, which the Demiurgus did not wish to subsist? For it is not lawful to assert that he was willing some things should subsist, but produced others, since in divine natures to be willing and to produce are simultaneous and conjoined. Hence, evil is not only a thing contrary to the will of divinity, but is also without hypostasis. Divinity not only not producing it, for this it is not even lawful to suppose, but not suffering it to subsist. Proclus answers that physical evil, viz. The evil which is corruptive of the essence, power, and energy of a thing, is not evil but good, because it subsists on account of good, and because generation is from corruption, of which two the world consists, and by which the order of the universe is adorned. There is not, however, such a thing as unmingled evil, and evil itself, or an eternal idea, form and essence of evil. But moral evil is mixed with good, and so far as it is good, it subsists from divinity, but so far as evil, it is derived from another cause which is impotent. For evil is nothing else than a greater or less declination, departure, defect, and privation from the good itself, and which is good alone, in the same manner as darkness from the sun. It is the debility and absence of power in energizing, but is not power. And that which is evil to partial natures is not evil to the universe. 2. Evil is not in the Gods, nor in the triple government of the better genera, viz. It is neither in angels, for how could we call them messengers and elucidators of the Gods, if evil of any kind was in them who are the images of the divinities, and who dwelling in the vestibules of deity participate of its goodness? Nor in demons, nor in heroes. If divinity produced evil, he either produced it contrary to his nature, or everything thence subsisting will be boniform, and the progeny of the goodness that abides in him. But, as it is said, it is not the property of fire to impart cold, nor of good to produce evil from itself. Either therefore it must be said that evil is not, if it is necessary to its existence that it should be produced by divinity, or that it is, and does not originate from deity. Against those who assert that evil is primarily in demons, he observes as follows. There are certain persons who attribute passions to demons, and say that some of their passions are according to nature, as when they tragically speak of their deaths, and different generations, but that others are from choice only, as when they denominate certain demons base and evil, who, they also say, defile souls, lead them to matter, and draw them down from their journey to the heavens to the subterranean region. It is necessary, however, to ask these persons whether are the demons, which you say are evil, such to themselves, or in their own nature, or not to themselves, but to others. For if they are evil to themselves, one of two things must follow: either that they must remain in evil forever, or that they must be susceptive of transmutation. And if indeed they are always evil, how can that which subsists from the Gods be perpetually evil? For it is better not to be at all than to be always evil. But if they are transmuted, they are not essentially evil, but are evil from habitude, in which there is the better and the worse, and another species of life. Demons, however, are always in the ratio of demons, and each of them is always in its own order. But if they are indeed good to themselves, but evil to others whom they lead into a worse condition, it is just as if some one should call teachers depraved, and certain pedagogues, who, ranking as the chastisers of offences, do not suffer the offenders to pursue a better order in a fluctuating manner, instead of an order which is adapted to them. Or as if some one should denominate those officers evil, who, standing before things of a sacred nature in temples, keep the impure from entering into the sanctuary, because they prohibit them from the participation of the interior rites. Hence it is not evil to perform this office, but to be of such an order, and to deserve such a prohibition. If therefore of the demons that are in the world, some lead souls upward, but others keep such in their own manners as are not yet able to ascend, we cannot justly call either of them evil, neither those that separate from, nor those that detain souls in a corporeal life. For it is necessary that there should also be those demons who coerce the soul that is defiled with vice, and is unworthy of a progression into the heavens, in the place which surrounds the earth. Neither, therefore, in these does reason appear to discover evil; for whatever they do, they perform according to their own nature, and always after the same manner, but this is not evil. 3. Evil in souls is a debility of not always and uniformly adhering to better natures and to good. Hence arises their descent to things subordinate, their oblivion, their malefic inclination to things conversant with body, and their discord with reason. According to some, matter is that which is primarily evil, and evil itself, and the debility of souls arises from their lapse into matter. This Proclus denies, and says that both body and matter originate from deity, and that both are the progeny of divinity. He adds that matter is the first indefinite, and that essential infinity, in the same manner as a mixed body depends on one cause, divinity; that souls sinned before they were thrust into matter; that there are not two principles, matter and deity; and that matter is neither good nor evil, but a thing necessary and distant in the last degree from the good itself. 4. Of good, there is one eternal, definite, universal and producing cause, viz. God. But of evils, the causes are manifold and infinite, some to souls and others to bodies. They are also fluctuating, indefinite, inordinate, and particular, surrounding the nature of souls and bodies from necessity, and arising from impotency, incommensuration void of design, unadaptation, debility, and the victory of a subordinate nature. Good has an hypostasis, but evil a parhypostasis, or a deviation from hypostasis. Good is form, but evil is without form and is, as it were, privation. 5. Evil possesses its power of acting and its capability from a contrary good, which becomes debile and inefficacious on account of the mixture of evil, and evil is allotted its efficacy and energy on account of the presence of good, for both are in one. Thus in bodies, that which is preternatural debilitates that which is according to nature, the energy of nature being in this case dormant, and order, in which good consists, being dissolved. Thus also in souls, evil, when it vanquishes good, uses its power, videre licet, the power of reason, to its own purposes, and makes it subservient to desire. Each of these also imparts something according to its own nature, videre licet, the one power, but the other debility, because of itself evil is neither adapted to act nor to possess power. For all power is good, and all energy is an extension of power. And this, Plato knowing, says that injustice itself is of itself debile and inactive, but through the presence of justice possesses its power, and is led forth into energy, not abiding in its own nature. Nor does evil alone consist in a privation of life, because being which subsists prior to life gives also to evil a participation of life. All life, however, is of itself power, but evil subsisting in a foreign power is contrary to good, employing its own power for the purpose of opposing good. And the more power indeed is inherent in it, the greater are the energies and works of evil, and the less it possesses of power, the less are its energies and works. In bodies too, as soon as the powers of nature cease, the preternatural energy which is in them ceases also, and hence all order is entirely dissolved, that which is preternatural being more abundant. When the soul, therefore, receives an increase from that which is contrary to good, according to its base and formless nature, but is diminished according to virtue and energy, then it becomes at the same time debile and inefficacious. For the augmentation is not then from power, that the transition might be to something greater, but it arises from the presence of the contrary to power, just as if frigidity should use the power of heat to the accomplishment of its own work, vanquishing and subjecting its power. The soul, therefore, being deficient through the absence of good, and possessing more of privation in proportion as it has more of deficiency, becoming also more debile in its energies through a diminution of virtue, is indeed more evil, but performs less. And how indeed could the increase, since it is evil, be from power, if the work of all power is to preserve that in which it is? But evil dissipates everything of which it is the evil. Hence, evil is of itself inefficacious and impotent. If also, as Plato says, it is involuntary, it will not be the object of the will, and thus it will be a privation of the first triad of the good, viz. Of will, power, and energy. For good, indeed, is the object of the will, and is in its own nature powerful and efficacious. But evil is unwished for, is debile, and inefficacious. For that is not the object of the will to anything which is corruptive of it, nor does power wish for that which may corrupt it, nor does energy wish not to have its hypostasis according to power. But evil is desired in consequence of appearing to be good, and we say that evil seems to be an object of the will, on account of the mixture of good with it. Power, therefore, and energy are apparently in evil, but are not so in reality, because they are not essentially inherent in it, nor so far as it is evil, but they extrinsically accede to it, as that to which a parhypostasis belongs. Hence, as it appears to me, this is what Socrates shows in the Theaetetus to those who are able to understand his meaning, viz. That evil is neither privation nor the contrary to good. For privation is not able to effect anything, nor does it in short possess any power, nor does that which is contrary to good of itself possess either power or energy. But he denominates evil, in a certain respect, subcontrary to good, because of itself indeed, or essentially, it is privation, yet because it is not altogether perfect privation, but in a similar manner with habit changes from capacity, it is from thence constituted in energizing in the part of contrariety, and is neither perfect privation, nor contrary, but subcontrary to good. 7. There are these three things which may debilitate, and in which there is evil, viz. A partial soul, the image of soul in animals, and body. The evil to body is to have a preternatural subsistence. The evil to the image of soul is to be in a state of deviation from reason. And the evil to soul, id. To the rational soul, is to deviate from intellect. The defect of life according to reason is the malady of this life, but ignorance and a privation of intellect are baseness, whether this takes place about the dianoetic or the doxastic power. And if about the former, it is a want of science, but if about the latter, of art. Baseness, however, and malady subsist in one way in cognitions, and in another in impulses. For the irrational appetites are hostile to the life which consists in action, and the many senses, and precipitate imaginations intervening in the contemplative energy destroy its purity and immateriality. Hence, unbecoming imaginations, or evil consent, and base choice arise, either from an external source, and in various actions, or internally according to anger and desire. That also which is preternatural is twofold. For in the body it is either deformity, as in monsters, or malady, in consequence of the order and commensuration of the body being dissolved, as in corruption, disease, and pain. In many persons, mediated evil, and which abides occultly within the soul, is benefited as being base and unbecoming. But when it subsists in energy, the quality of it becomes apparent. It is manifested, however, by penitence and the consciousness of the soul. For the medical art also, in the opening of ulcers and leading forth externally the inwardly concealed cause which produced the malady, exhibits an image of the operations of Providence, which permits base deeds and passions, in order that the perpetrators of them, being changed from the habit which they have acquired, and which is inflated with evils, may assume the principle of a better period and life. But whatever passions are within the soul are attended with this good, that they always lead the soul to a proper condition, her improper choice being accompanied with punishment. Thus also the law which is in souls leads each to its appropriate state, and to that desert which is derived from Providence. 9. Evil cannot exist, if it is admitted that it is not contrary to good, because all things, and even evil itself, are for the sake of good. Divinity, therefore, is not the cause of evil. For evil, so far as evil never originates from thence, but from other causes, which, as we have said, generate not according to power, but on account of debility. Hence it appears to me that Plato, when he places all things about the King of all, and says that all things are for his sake, even things which are not good appearing to be good, and in a similar manner belonging to beings, calls him the cause of everything good, and not at once the cause of all things, for he is not the cause of evil, but is the cause of every being, and of everything so far as it is good. If, therefore, we assert these things rightly, all things will be from Providence, and evil will have a place among beings. Hence also the gods produce evil, but they produce it as good, and they know, as possessing a unical knowledge of all things, partibles impartibly, evils according to the form of good, and multitude according to the form of the one. For there is one knowledge of soul, another of an intellectual nature, and another of the gods themselves. For the first of these indeed is a self-motive, the second an eternal, and the third an indivisible and unical knowledge, knowing and producing all things by the one. End of extracts from the treatise of Proclus on the subsistence of evil. Extract from Commentaries of Proclus on the Timaeus by Proclus, translated by Thomas Taylor. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. For the further information of the reader on this most important subject, the subsistence of evil, the following admirable extract is added from the Commentaries of Proclus on the Timaeus, page 112. The comment is on these words, quote, "Divinity, being willing that all things should be good, and that, as much as possible, nothing should be evil," close quote, and is as follows. Quote, "The divine fabrication and intellectual production proceeds from things impartible to such as are partible, from the united to the multiplied, and from things without interval to corporeal masses that are every way distended with interval. This also the discourse about it adumbrating, in the first place, enunciatively celebrates the final cause, afterwards discursively, and in the third place delivers in an evolved manner the whole orderly distribution and progression from it. For the words, quote, 'He was good,' close quote, uniformly indeed comprehend everything final, and the most divine of causes. But the words, quote, 'In that which is good, envy is never inherent about anything, and being without this, he was willing that all things should be generated as much as possible similar to himself,' close quote, effect this discursively. For, after the one will of intellect, he introduces the divided contemplation of it. And in the present words, he delivers to us the intelligence of divinity, now proceeding into all multitude and interval, evolving every demiurgic providence, and all the parts of fabrication. Moreover, the third of these is in continuity with the second, and the second with the first. For since the first particle was, quote, 'He was good,' close quote, on this account the second begins from the good, but proceeds as far as to the will of the Father. But the third, beginning from will, delivers the whole of his providential energy. For if he was good, he was willing to make all things good. But if he was willing, he made them to be so, and led the universe into order. For providence indeed is suspended from will, but will from goodness. And thus much concerning the order and connection of the words. Let us, however, consider what this will is, in order that we may understand how it is conjoined with goodness. Superessential union itself, therefore, and which is of itself exempt from beings, is indeed one, ineffable and indefinite, having the uncircumscribed and the incomprehensible in the one itself. If, therefore, it be requisite to survey in this the above mentioned uniform triad, goodness indeed has the precedency, but will is the second, and providence is the third. Goodness indeed producing the perfect, the sufficient, and the desirable, but will exhibiting exuberant plenitude, the extended and the generative, and providence imparting the efficacious, the perfective, and the undefiled. According to this ineffable and united hyparxis of the triad, the intelligible also is triply divided into essence, power, and energy. Essence indeed being firmly established in it, and being self-perfect, but power having a never-failing and infinite progression, and energy being allotted perfection and essential production. And again, intellect, after the same manner, is triply divided into being, life, and the intellectual. For the first of these indeed is the supplier of its existence, the second of its life, and the third of its gnostic power. After these also, soul is divided into that which is the object of science, into science, and into that which is scientific. For the first of these is that which is known, the second is knowledge, and the third is that which derives its completion from both these. These triads, therefore, being four, as goodness is to will, so is essence to power, being to life, and the object of science to science. And as will is to providence, so is power to energy, life to intellect, and science to that which is scientific. For essence, being, and the object of science have an order analogous to goodness. For the connective, the stable, the uniform, and the perfective pertain to goodness. But power, life, and science are analogous to will. For the self-begotten, and that which comprehends and measures all things, belong to will, and energy, intellect, and that which is scientific pertain to providence. For the efficacious, and that which proceeds through and antecedently comprehends all things, are the resemblances of divine providence. Since, therefore, the Demiurgus also is a God, and an imparticipable intellect, so far as he is a God indeed, he possesses goodness, will, and providence. But as intelligible, he has essence, power, and energy. And as intellect, he is and has life, and a knowledge of wholes. The monad also, which he possesses, is suspended from unity. And thus much concerning will. Consequent to this, it remains to inquire how the Demiurgus wished all things to be good, and if this is possible, and in what manner. For it may be said, if he was willing that this should be the case, it would be requisite that the progression of things should stop at the Gods and undefiled essences. If, however, he not only fabricated these, but also brutes, and reptiles, and men, and everything material, he was not willing that all things should be good. For he was not willing that better natures should exist, but also fabricated such as are worse. If he had been willing therefore that all things should be good, he would have stopped his fabrication at the Gods. We reply, however, that if the progression of things was only as far as to the Gods, all things would not be good. For first natures being allotted the last order, the good would be destroyed, since being able and willing to generate through their goodness, yet in consequence of an arrangement as the last of things, they would become unprolific and not good. Our opponents therefore say, if all things are good, the progression is as far as to the Gods. But we say, if the progression of things extends only as far as to the Gods, all things are not good. For if a divine nature is unprolific, how is it good? But it will be unprolific if it is the last of things. For everything which generates is better than that which is generated. But the less excellent nature not existing, that which is more excellent will have no subsistence. Let there be the Gods therefore, and let them have the first order. But after the Gods, let there be a progression as far as to matter itself, And let us give a transition to all beings, from the first to the last of things. And neither let there be anything wanting even of the last of beings, nor any vacuum. For what vacuum can there be, when things characterized by itself have the first subsistence? Those that rank as the second proceed from these. Those of the third order proceed from these and others. Those in the fourth rank are generated from things characterized by the term another, and those in the fifth rank being others only, and on each side of these those natures subsisting which are dissimilarly similar. Such therefore being the continuity in things, what can be deficient? Immovable natures being first established, self-motive natures having the second, and alter-motive natures the third rank, all of which are the last of things. For all beings derive their completion from the above-mentioned orders. In short, the production of things may be shown to be continued in many ways, and if you are willing, so to speak, analogy subsisting from on high as far as to the last of things, according to the well-ordered progression of all beings from the one. Let therefore all these things be acknowledged, and let the generation of beings be extended as far as to nothing. But whether is there nothing evil in these? Or shall we admit that there is in a certain respect, and that there is what is called depravity in bodies and in souls? For some have been led by this doubt to take away evil entirely, but others have been induced to deny a providence, in consequence of believing that if providence has a subsistence, all things are good. For if indeed divinity was willing there should be evil, how can he be good? For it is the province of that which is essentially good to benefit everything, just as it is of that which is essentially hot to give heat. But it is not lawful for the good to affect anything else than what is good. And if divinity was not willing there should be evil, how can it have a subsistence? For something will exist contrary to the will of the Father of all things. Such therefore is the doubt. We must see, however, conformably to the doctrine of Plato, according to our preceptor, that the habitude of divinity with respect to things subsists in a different manner from that of ours, and again, that the habitude of things with reference to deity is different from their habitude with reference to us. For wholes have a relation to parts different from that of parts to each other. To divinity, therefore, nothing is evil, not even of the things which are called evil. For he uses these also to a good purpose. But again, to partial natures there is a certain evil, these being naturally adapted to suffer by it. And the same thing is to a part indeed evil, but to the universe and to wholes is not evil, but good. For so far as it is a being, and so far as it participates of a certain order, it is good. For this thing which is said to be evil, if you apprehend it to be destitute of all good, you will make it to be beyond even that which in no respect whatever is. For as the good itself is prior to being, so evil itself is posterior to the nothingness of non-entity. For that which is most distant from the good is evil, and not that which has no kind of subsistence. If therefore that which in no respect whatever is, has more of subsistence than evil itself, but this is impossible, it is much more impossible that there should be such a thing as evil itself. If, however, that which is entirely evil has no subsistence, but evil is complicated with good, you give it a place among beings, and you make it good to other things. And indeed, how is it possible it should not, if it ranks among beings? For that which participates of being, participates also of unity, and that which participates of unity, participates likewise of good. Hence evil, if it is, participates of good, because evil has not an unmingled subsistence, and is not entirely deprived of order and indefinite. Who therefore made it to be such? Who imparted to it measure and order and bound? It is evident that it is the Demiurgus who rendered all things similar to himself, for he filled both wholes and parts with good. But if he benefits all things, and colors evil itself with good, there is nothing evil according to the power of divinity and of recipients. For power is twofold, one being that of divinity, which benefits the depravity that is so abundantly seen, but the other being that of recipients, which participate of the goodness of the Demiurgus according to the measure of their order in the scale of beings. In consequence, therefore, of the Demiurgus being willing that there should be nothing evil, nothing is evil. But if certain persons accuse him as the cause of evil, because he gave subsistence to partial natures, they take away the fabrication of the world, subvert the prolific power of wholes, and confound the nature of things first and last. That we assert these things, however, conformably to the opinion of Plato, may be easily seen from his writings. For in the Politicus he clearly says, "that the world obtained from its maker all beautiful things, but from its former habit all such injustice and evil as are produced within the heavens." For because there is generation and also corruption, that which is preternatural has a subsistence, and because the deformity of matter fills partial souls with inelegance through an association with it, on this account that which is not conformable to reason is allotted a certain resemblance of subsistence. At the same time, however, all these particulars become beautiful through the goodness of the Maker of the universe. But in the Republic, Plato assigns no other cause of good than God, and says that certain other causes of evils are to be investigated, through which he manifests that evils do not derive their subsistence from divinity. For it is not, says he, the province of fire to refrigerate, nor of snow to heat, nor of that which is all good to produce evil. And he asserts that certain partial causes of these are to be admitted, and such as are indefinite. For it is not in evils as in things that are good, viz. that the one, and what is primarily good, precede multitude, and this on account of the indefinite diffusion of evil. The words others, therefore, and certain, evince that the causes of evil are partial and indefinite. But in the Theaetetus he says, "that it is neither possible for evils to be abolished, nor for them to be in the Gods, but that they revolve from necessity about the mortal nature, and this place of our abode." If, therefore, evil revolves necessarily in the mortal place, it will not be according to Plato, that which in no respect whatever has a subsistence, and which is exempt from all beings; so that, according to him, evil exists, is from partial causes, and is benefited through the boniform providence of the Demiurgus, because there is nothing which is entirely evil, but everything is in a certain respect accomplished conformably to justice and divinity. For we may make the following division. Of all that the world contains, some things are wholes, but others parts; and of parts, some eternally preserve their own good, such as a partial intellect, and partial daemons; but others are not always able to preserve their proper good. And of these, some are alter motive, but others self-motive. And of self-motive natures, some have evil established in their choice, but in others it terminates in actions. With respect to wholes, therefore, they are perfectly good, supplying not only themselves, but also parts with good. Such things, however, as are parts, and yet preserve their own good, possess good secondarily and partially. But such as are parts and alter motive, deriving their subsistence from other things, are suspended from the providence of them, and are transmuted in a becoming manner, as is the case with such bodies as are generated and corrupted. For if it is necessary that there should be generation, it is also necessary that there should be corruption. For generation subsists according to mutation, and is a certain mutation. But if there is corruption, it is necessary that the preternatural should be secretly introduced. As, therefore, that which is corrupted is indeed corrupted with reference to itself, but is not destroyed with reference to the universe; for it is either air or water, or something else into which it is changed. Thus also, that which is preternatural is indeed with respect to itself disordered, but with respect to the universe has an orderly arrangement. For if, though it should be destroyed, and entirely deprived of order, it would not dissolve the order of the universe, how is it possible that, when having a preternatural subsistence, which is of itself nothing when deprived of all order, it can destroy the whole arrangement of things? But again, partial natures, which are self-motive indeed, and whose energy is directed to externals, cause that which is affected by their energy to be evil to themselves; yet in a certain respect this also is good, and conformable to divinity. For since impulses and actions are from choice, actions follow elections according to justice, when he who chooses not only deserves the retribution consequent to his choice, but that also which follows from his conduct. And simply indeed the action is not good; but to him who chooses a certain thing, and is impelled in a certain way, it is introduced according to justice, and is good to this individual and this particular life. For of goods, some are good to all things, others to such as differ according to species, and others to individuals so far as they are individuals. For hellebore is not good to all men, nor to all bodies, nor yet to all diseased bodies; but it is good to one who is diseased in a particular manner, and is salutary from a certain principle. Whether, therefore, the action is intemperate or unjust, to those who perform it indeed it is good, so far as it is conformable to justice, but simply it is not good; nor to those by whom it is done, but is to them the greatest evil. And so far as it proceeds from them and is directed to them, it is evil; but so far as it proceeds from the universe to them, it is not evil. And so far as their energy is directed to themselves, they destroy their life, becoming actually depraved; but so far as they suffer from the universe, they undergo the punishment of their choice. Just as it is said that those who deliberate about betraying a suppliant subvert divinity, or they suffer the punishment of their will. Let us, however, direct our attention to what remains, viz. To such partial natures as energize self-motively, and who stop their depravity as far as to their choice; for they suffer the punishment of their cogitation alone. For, as it is said, there is a certain punishment of mere imagination, impulse, and will; since the Gods govern us inwardly, and as they reward beneficent choice, so likewise they punish the contrary. But it may be said, how can choice itself have that which is conformable to justice and divinity? May we not reply, because it is necessary there should be an essence of this kind, and a power of an ambiguous nature, and which verges to different lives. If, therefore, that which has dominion over choice is from divinity, choice also is from divinity; and if this be the case, it is good. For the electing soul alone is transferred to another and another order; for all choice either elevates the soul, or draws it downward to an inferior condition of being. And if indeed the choice is from a depraved soul, it is evil; but if it transfers that which chooses to its proper order, it is according to justice and good. For the choice itself introduces punishment to the electing soul; or rather, the choice becomes punishment in him who chooses, causing the soul to apostatize from good. For as a beneficent choice becomes truly the reward of itself, so a depraved choice becomes its own punishment. For this is the peculiarity of self-motive powers. Hence there is no evil which is not also in a certain respect good; but all things participate of Providence. If, however, certain persons should ask on what account an evil-producing cause had at first a subsistence, though it should not rank among wholes, but is of a partial nature, to these it must be said that the progression of beings is continued, and that no vacuum is left among them. Whether, therefore, is it necessary that there should not be every self-motive life? But we shall thus take away many natures that are divine. Or shall we say it is necessary there should be wholes that are self-motive, but there is no necessity there should be self-motive parts? But how is it possible they should be wholes, if deprived of their proper parts? And how will the continuity of beings be preserved, if wholes and self-motive natures have a prior existence, and also partial and altermotive natures, but we entirely destroy the intermediate natures, viz. Such as are self-motive indeed, but at the same time partial; and which through the partial form become connected with habitude, but through the self-motive power, are at a certain time liberated from habitude. It is necessary, therefore, that there should be this life also, which is a medium in beings, and the bond of things which have, as it were, an arrangement contrary to each other. Evil, however, is not on this account natural to the soul, since she is essentially the mistress of her choice. For the animated body has an essential tendency to disease, for it is essentially corruptible, and yet disease is not according to nature. Hence disease is indeed evil to the partial nature which is allotted to connect this particular body, but is good to the wholeness of bodies. For it is necessary that what is generated from other things should be changed into another thing. As therefore to the nature which is in us, it is good for the nutriment to be changed, in order to the preservation of the animal, thus also to every nature it is good for a part to be corrupted, in order that the wholes may be preserved, which are always prior to parts. For if parts were generated from wholes, and the things generated should remain, all things would be rapidly consumed in consequence of wholes becoming partial natures. For a continued ablation taking place from things of a finite nature, the whole must necessarily fail. But wholes not existing, either generation will be stopped, or mutation to partial natures will be derived from other things. Hence, that which is evil to a partial nature is good to the whole life of the world. Farther still, therefore, resuming the inquiry after another manner from the beginning, if we are asked whether divinity was willing there should be evil, or was not willing, we reply that he was both. For he was willing indeed, considered as imparting being to all things. For everything in the universe which has any kind of being proceeds from the demiurgic cause. But he was not willing, considered as producing all things good. For he concealed evil in the use of good. And if you are willing to argue physically, evil is produced essentially indeed from a partial soul, but accidentally from divinity, so far as it is evil, if it is admitted that divinity gave subsistence to the soul. Evil also, so far as it is essentially good, originates from a divine cause, but accidentally from the soul. For so far as it subsists according to justice, it possesses good. Again, Plato in the Laws defines what punishment is, videre licet, that it appears to consume him who suffers it, and resembles the opening of ulcers. And he who is incapable of being healed without a certain action, is incited to the performance of it, in order that the soul, being liberated from her parturiency and stupid astonishment about that which is base, and repenting of her own evils, may begin to be purified. For base and unjust actions, when they are the objects of hope, are lovely to those that vehemently admire them, but when accomplished, fill those that perform them with repentance. And when indeed they are the subjects of mediation, they cause the soul to be latently diseased. But when they have proceeded into energy, they demonstrate their own imbecility, but liberate the soul from the most disgraceful parturition. And some indeed exhibit this punishment according to the whole of their life, but others according to partial energies. For he who does anything irrational does it from choice, is impelled to that which is the object of his choice, and leads into energy that which pre-existed in his imagination. In short, evil is neither in intellectual natures, for the whole intellectual genus is free from all evil, nor in whole souls, or whole bodies, for all wholes are exempt from evil, as being perpetual and always subsisting according to nature. It remains, therefore, that it must be in partial souls or in partial bodies, but neither is it in the essences of these, for all their essences are derived from divinity, nor in their powers, for these subsist according to nature. Hence it remains that it must be in their energies. But with respect to souls, it is neither in such as are rational, for all these aspire after good, nor in such as are irrational, for these energize according to nature, but it subsists in the privation of symmetry of these with reference to each other. And in bodies, it is neither in form, for it wishes to rule over matter, nor in matter, for it aspires after the supervening ornaments of form, but it consists in the privation of symmetry between form and matter. From which also it is evident that every thing evil exists according to a peripostasis or resemblance of subsistence, and that at the same time it is colored by good, so that all things are good through the will of divinity, and as much as possible nothing is destitute of good. For it was not possible that generation existing, evil also should not have a shadowy subsistence, since it is necessary to the perfection of the whole of things. And from what has been said, it is evident that the will of divinity is not vain, for all things are good with reference to him, and there is not any being which is not vanquished by a portion of good. Nor are the words, "as much as possible," written superfluously, for they do not signify an imperfect power, but that power which rules over all things and benefits all things through an abundance of good. The end. End of extract from Commentaries of Proclus on the Timaeus, and end of the Elements of Theology by Proclus. Translated by Thomas Taylor. Read by Geoffrey Edwards. Meta-coordinated and proof listened by David Craig.